Hello, everyone. My name is Madeline, and today I am presenting case 2 about chronic liver disease, also known as alcoholic cirrhosis. So, this case focuses on how long term alcohol use damages the liver and leads to a variety of systemic symptoms through the loss of the normal hepatocyte function. So, we will also be examining a patient case of Miss Peggy Fender, a 59-year-old woman with a long history of alcohol use. She presents with right upper quadrant pain, jaundice, a distended abdomen, and confusion. Her exam shows that her liver is enlarged and firm. She has multiple bruises, and her abdomen is fluid filled, which is a condition called ascites. Blood tests show elevated liver enzymes, high glucose, and a prolonged clotting time. We will talk about her symptoms and the physiology behind their causes. So first, we're going to talk about how cirrhosis develops. So over time, chronic alcohol use damages the liver's main cells, the hepatocytes. At first, fat accumulates in the liver, leading to a condition called fatty liver. As damage continues, inflammation and scar tissue form, and that is called fibrosis. And then after the fibrosis, continued alcohol use eventually causes the progression to cirrhosis, where scar tissue replaces the healthy tissue and prevents the liver from functioning properly. Okay, so now we're going to connect normal liver functions to why Peggy's symptoms develop when they fail. So to understand Peggy's symptoms, it's important to remember what healthy hepatocytes do. So first of all, they produce bile to help digest fats and remove bilirubin. They detoxify harmful substances like alcohol and ammonia, and they make important proteins like albumin and clotting factors. And they also regulate blood sugar by storing and releasing glycogen. When these processes fail, the effects show up throughout the body because the liver is part of the digestive system and it's connected to everywhere else inside of our bodies. Okay, so now we're going to dive into Peggy's symptoms and explain how those happen. So I made this table here to kind of organize everything and to help us explore each of Peggy's symptoms individually and connect each symptom to a specific liver function. So, Peggy's symptoms directly reflect the loss of each of these functions. For example, her ascites, the fluid in the abdomen, happens because the liver isn't making enough albumin, which lowers the blood osmotic pressure, and then while the scar tissue increases the portal pressure. So, this leads to fluid leaking into the abdominal cavity, which causes portal hypertension due to the fibrosis and further increases the fluid buildup. And then her jaundice is from bilirubin buildup in the liver because the liver can't process it. So the hepatocytes are unable to excrete the bilirubin, which causes a buildup in the blood, and then that causes the yellowing of the skin and the eyes. And then next is her hyperglycemia. So because her hepatocytes are damaged, they're also impaired. There's impaired uptake and storage of the glucose as glycogen. And the damaged liver releases glucose into the blood unchecked because they're not able to filter through that. And so it's not properly stored as glycogen. So that causes the elevated glucose levels in her blood. Next is her prolonged PT, or the slow clotting. So hepatocytes produce clotting factors, prothrombin, fibrinogen, And the damage to the liver causes decreased synthesis of those clotting factors. So that leads to a slower clotting time. And then this also has to do with bruising, because due to the decrease of clotting factors, the blood vessels are more fragile, which leads to greater bruises. And then her enlarged and hard liver is due to the fibrosis and inflammation that's caused by the scar tissue buildup. And finally, her confusion slash poor coordination is the buildup of toxins in due to the hepatic encephalopathy, because the toxins are not removed from the body properly. So all of these are caused by damage to the liver. And here's just a little visual summary that kind of summarizes her symptoms. So first is the alcohol, and then that leads to the hepatocyte damage, which is then leading to fibrosis and cirrhosis. And then third is the decrease in albumin, which leads to the ascites. Decrease of bilirubin processing leads to jaundice. Decrease of clotting factors lead to prolonged PT and bruising. Decrease of glucose regulation leads to hyperglycemia. And then decrease of detoxification leads to hepatic encephalopathy. So here is a summarization of the key takeaways. So to summarize, cirrhosis affects nearly every system in the body because the liver plays such a central role in metabolism, detoxification, and protein synthesis, which we wouldn't really think, that it does that, but it really is connected to everything in the body. So each of Peggy's symptoms, from fluid buildup to confusion and glucose, bile formation, all of that stuff, can be traced directly back to the loss of a specific liver function, which we can see here in this little table that I made. So this case with Peggy Fender is a really good illustration of how damage to a single organ can have widespread effects. And also why prevention and early treatment of liver disease is so crucial. So we see here that protein synthesis, which happens in the liver, a normal function, it makes albumin and clotting factors, but in cirrhosis that is decreased. And then we see the result as ascites and bleeding. And then the next system that's affected is bile formation. Normally, it removes the bilirubin, but when it's impaired, that can lead to jaundice. And then the next system that's affected is glucose metabolism. The change from the change from glycogen to glucose in the liver. So normally, in normal function, the liver stores glucose as glycogen, but when that is disrupted, it's not stored as glycogen. It is then, it still is glucose. So that leads to elevated glucose levels in the blood, which is hyperglycemia. And then finally, there's detoxification, which is normally the liver removes toxins, but in cirrhosis that is impaired, and so that leads to an increase of toxins in the body, which can lead to confusion or encephalopathy. And then finally, just to have a quick little practice for the students, I made this little worksheet. It has just 3 little parts, all based on the tables that I made previously in these slides. And the first part is just a little recall of the function of the liver. So what are the main functions of hepatocytes? What proteins help maintain fluid balance? And then which organelle in hepatocytes is important for detoxifying alcohol? And then the second part is talking about the symptoms and how they're related to Peggy Fender's liver function. And the third part is filling in this little visual diagram that I made, and then a little bonus question at the end. So thank you for watching, and take care of your liver.